Welcome everybody to podcast. We are once again joining you guys. Had a little bit of a break, That's on us. Our bad, NBA playoffs and we take a break. Totally a great time for the 5 viewers out there. But Kyle was a little bit sick, so we had to make sure that he was feeling a little bit better. I would be sick too after watching my Timberwolves get absolutely decimated in the playoffs, especially after losing many stars. But I don't want to talk stuff because my team's still in here and I have superstition. All right, so I'm just that's just my own joke. All right, I had to do it. But like I said, I'm once again joined by Kyle Finnegan. How you doing, Kyle?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. And I'm also joined by Matthew Biegel. Boy.
Dude, what's up? Next time.
Yes.
It's tomorrow. Game 1. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be a fun series. It's going to be really fun.
It's going to be a great series, guys. I couldn't be more excited for it, as obviously the Knicks fan. But I want to know your guys' thoughts about this. First off, had a long road to get here for both teams. And I just want to know, what's your guys' first thoughts going into the series? Matt, let's start off with you.
So we are expecting, of course, like I said, we are expecting a very fun series. I mean, this is probably going to be the most dominating Spurs team we've seen since the last time that the Knicks and Spurs went into the finals back in '99. It's been a lot of fun seeing what they've been able to do with the Thunder, completely dismantle them in Game 6 and 7, take it back from a 3-2 lead, and just absolutely dominate in that fourth quarter of Game 7. Blocked by Cornette. That's not gonna go away for multiple years. We're gonna remember that Game 7 for a while, no matter what happens.
That Luke Cornette block might genuinely be one of the most insane highlights for and it always happens in any playoff series where some guy you never expect to rise is going to show up in the biggest moments, and of course it's Luke freaking Cornette. But Kyle, what is your initial thoughts going into the series? You've been keeping an eye on Wemby the most with being in the West with Timberwolves all year. So what's your thoughts going into this finals?
It's going to be fun because you got probably the most high-powered offense going up against probably the high-powered defense. So which one will prevail? Whoever knows. It's going to be fun to see what the Knicks can overcome with their deficiencies on defense, especially going up against Wembanyama, because Cat, obviously he's got the offensive firepower. He doesn't have the defensive firepower. Same thing with Brunson. So it's going to be an interesting playoffs with these two teams.
Definitely, I couldn't agree more. I will say Cat has been playing some of his best defense, I will say, this last few playoff games. Now, it's still Cat in playoffs, and he's going to be going against Wemby. I don't think there's anybody who can stop that man. But I will just say I agree with you with Brunson when he's going to have to be dealing with Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle and De'Aaron Fox. Like, that's just a three-headed monster that even if Fox had been dealing with some injuries, that's going to be worrisome. But I think that Knicks defense with having OG and McCall on the wings, I think they have a little bit of a chance. But before we fully dive deep into that, we were kind of talking about Wemby a little bit before, and it's crazy to me. He's already in the finals in his first playoff run. All right, beat the defending champions. He's looked absolutely insane. The team has looked great despite the youth on it. I just got to know, is this the dawning of, the NBA's next generational star? Kyle, let's start with you.
Everyone thought it was going to be OKC, but we could tell even though OKC has a championship under their belts because of last year, realistically, the one who probably rebuilt the better roster, it looks like the Spurs. They got all the guards, the young guards and everything. They have Victor Wembanyama, who dismantled Chet in their series. So it looks like they overall built better. OKC's traded for a couple of pieces and everything, but on top, who came out on top was the Spurs.
For sure. Matt, Kyle kind of touched on it there. That roster construction by the Spurs, all coming from the draft for the most part, obviously they've added some of the older vets like Harrison Barnes throughout the year, so he's been there for a long time. They've drafted some of their older vets as well, like Keldon Johnson, but they've also had, what's it called? I mentioned before Harper, Stephon Castle, obviously Wemby. They've built this team organically, Is that a big reason why the Spurs are here in the finals? Or do you think it's just truly the dominance of the three-headed monster that we talked about before of Castle, Harper, and Wemby?
I mean, you can say so much about who you draft because drafts can be flops. We've seen it. We've seen the next LeBron. Welcome to the league, Ben Simmons. Chill out, LeBron. Ben Simmons is here. But it really has been shown the dominance that they've had, even on the bench. I mean, of course, we've had Dylan Harper. I mean, he was going off in games 6 and 7. He was a legitimate scorer. You would not have expected him to come off the bench and score over 10 with pretty much easy buckets for him. And we've seen just this three-headed monster just coming for OKC. And of course, we've also seen kind of a collapse from OKC as well. I mean, game 7, there was multiple guys that had 7 points or less. I mean, you had Chet with 2, and you had Hartenstein with 7. And then you had Wemby throwing up 28 on your head. And then you have people like Cornette getting chase down blocks like it's game 7 of the 2016 finals. So we've just really seen a lot of clutch come up from those guys, and it's been awesome to actually see the Spurs decide to dismantle them finally after game 5. It was a little scary looking into game 6. You thought maybe the OKC were going to do it in the Spurs arena, but no, the Spurs came back and they did it in their hometown. So it's just been a lot of dominance that we've seen, a lot of clutch that we've seen from pretty much the entire rotation.
For sure, it's been a truly incredible run to put them all the way here. Like, obviously, I feel like a lot of people had that, hype behind them, or at least kind of idea that, hey, we might be getting Spurs OKC in the Western Conference Finals all year. It was you kind of thought about, granted, there was still a lot of other great teams around. Like, still had to worry about the Timberwolves, Kyle mentioned before. Nuggets are always still a worry, even though I didn't think they were great, but Jokic can never count them out. Like, West is always stacked top to bottom, but I feel like Wemby is really just helped put that team on his back, despite not even being the greatest offensive performance sometimes. Like, he only had 22 points, I believe, in Game 4, which is still very good, but it's really just his defense is so insane. Like, I remember I heard the broadcaster the other night. It was a 2-on-1, and Wemby was the only one there, and he just went, who's the one? Because literally this man completely shut down half the game for OKC. And honestly, though, when we were talking about dominance, doesn't always make me think of the Spurs, though, because it does make me think about their opponent, the Knicks. Now, this isn't just me being a little bit of a Knicks homer, but New York, how about it? They swept the Cleveland Cavaliers after sweeping the Philadelphia 76ers. They're the only team that's played 3 teams coming off of 7-game series. They're the team with the most rest ever going into a finals, I believe. And the only 2 games they've lost, like I mentioned in the last episode, were only by 1 point. Now, I know the Spurs team is absolutely stacked in terms of being an elite defensive team along with being an elite scoring team, but I feel like the Knicks team's got to be at least, able to match up with them somewhat pretty well. So I just got to know from you guys, does that momentum from the Knicks kind of outweigh what the Spurs have been kind of putting down so far? Matt, let's start with you.
So, yeah, I mean, you definitely have seen a huge advantage from the Knicks in each and every single series. I mean, they have a 270-point differential between all the teams that they beat. They're coming in with fire. I know that a lot of rest can be detrimental. I mean, you're not playing. You're not, there's only so much you can do in practice. You don't have the pressure of the actual playoffs. You don't have the pressure of the finals. So you get rest, but also it might be good for a player like Mitchell Robinson to hopefully come back in time. Starting tomorrow, it's still questionable if he's going to play game 1. Hopefully he's going to play, game 2, game 3. We'll see. I don't know how bad the pinky injury still is today, but we're definitely going to see a great Knicks lineup. Mitchell Robinson is going to be a big point in that, so hopefully we can get him back soon.
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, with the Mitchell Robinson thing, I think that questionable tag is more so just having to have to put the tag on him, just knowing that he has the injury. I don't think it's really a question of if he's going to play. It's more so, okay, when's he suiting up in the game for how long? Because I saw the Shams report when he first had the injury. Then I saw the second one where he said he plans to play. Like, obviously, if he has a setback or anything, but he's going to have this brace on, apparently. But hurts me to know that the game outside of game and outside of practice. Now, Mitch been tweeting a lot this offseason. I don't want to speculate, but hope Mitch is doing good. Love Mitch Rob. He's my boy. I've been loving him since we drafted him. Me and my dad have gotten many arguments just because of how much I love this man. There's 3 Knicks in my heart, all right? Brunson, Mitch Rob, OG. And it's that order, and it stays in that order. But as I was talking about, Mitchell Robinson, that injury could impact the New York Knicks because that chink in the armor is something that you don't want to see happen going into the finals, especially when you're facing literally the generational center who is 7 foot whatever, and you have Mitchell Robinson, who's known to be a good defensive guard, who's able to get rebounds. Defensive center, I should say. But I just want to know from you guys, do you think that Mitchell Robinson injury is really going to play a massive impact, or do you think that, hey, with him, even with the brace, obviously his free throw shooting wasn't anything great beforehand, and his offense wasn't the greatest thing outside of it dunking, but if he's got the brace on and he's playing, he's got to just do the same 2 jobs, and that should be able to help him do those 2 jobs. Do you think it will kind of limit his ability to help in this game or this series, or do you think that, hey, Mitchell Robinson still can be a factor and the Knicks aren't going to really deal too much with that injury? Kyle, we'll start with you.
No. Well, yes, in a sense, because you're mainly there for defense. Like you said, his free throw percentage isn't the greatest. He's not scoring too many points. He's there for defense mainly. So I feel like slapping around and everything, eventually that's going to start hurting after a while. But I don't think it's going to take a toll on him. So, I look to see some defensive blocks in this game from Mitch Robinson.
For sure. I hope those blocks definitely come his way, I do agree with you, though, when you said they're slapping around. That's my biggest worry. He's got that big-ass brace on his hand. All it takes is, hey, he swats a ball or someone hits his hand, and boom, his pinky is hurting all again. But, Matt, how much do you think this injury is going to play a big factor into this series?
It depends on what the brace does. If he gets limited in how much he can rebound because the brace is too big and it doesn't have enough grip, it could be very detrimental to what he's been able to do. He might also play a little more cautiously in terms of chase down blocks, stuff like that, just because you don't want to re-injure your hand when it's already down. You're in the finals. You want to give it your all, but you also don't want to limit yourself to maybe 1 or 2 games because you're playing too hard.
For sure. It's definitely something that, especially for a guy who, like I mentioned before, not to get too much into any speculation here, but he's talked about a lot openly on social media that his mental health has been something that he's been struggling with this season. And when now you have an injury, that's something that's going to weigh on you more. It's something where, hey, like you said, it can impact his gameplay where he might not want to do certain things that he's been so accustomed to doing just because he wants to try and protect his hand at the same time. But it remains to be seen. Obviously, we have to see even if he suits up for Game 1 tomorrow. But one thing to note about these 2 teams when they did play this regular season is even when dealing with injuries at times, Knicks had a winning record against the Spurs, including NBA Cup championship. Now, I know for a lot of people that doesn't usually mean a lot, but it is a game with stakes on the line. And I got to know, do you guys think that there's anything you can really buy into with some of these regular season, or do you think that these are 2 completely different teams from when they last met up? Matt, let's start with you.
So, regular season, you have pressure to get into the playoffs, but when your teams like the Spurs and the Knicks, especially where they are, you're not really too worried about the pressure to get to the playoffs. Of course, with a Nets fan like me, I have no pressure of getting to the playoffs because we're never going to get there. I'll be 45 by the time we get to the finals the next time. If that. Hopefully, the Eastern Conference Championships.
Igor Demon.
It's going to be an interesting next few years to see how the Nets come around. The pressure of the finals is something that players like Victor Wembanyama, he just hasn't had that yet. You're carrying an entire team, and I know a lot of the U.S. is rooting for the Spurs. I've seen it everywhere on Instagram and everything. So you have a lot of the country rooting on you to do that. So the pressure is going to be different, but we've seen with the pressure that they've had in Game 7s, Game 6, we've seen that they've been able to actually come through and get what they needed to done. But of course, the job's not done. The job's not finished.
Yeah, the job's not finished for anybody. It's just one of those things that, like you mentioned, there's pressure on both ends. For Wemby, it's getting through and winning that first NBA championship and proving himself as this next generational star that everyone's already proclaimed him to be. And for the Knicks, it's to end a 50-plus year championship drought that the city has been clamoring for. My dad was not even born when they last won a championship, and that man is older than dust. All right, so it is genuinely nuts to me how these two like colossal forces are meeting at the same time, and it's just like the last time the Knicks were in the finals. They faced Tim Duncan right when he was coming into the league, and of course that was right when he was paired with David Robinson, and Patrick Ewing was hurt after tearing his Achilles. So these things happen. Of course, the Knicks always have to run into the next generational big men. But I gotta know, do you think the pressure of that 50-year drought is going to be too much to bear for the New York Knicks, Kyle?
I mean, I think it would be. I don't know even how to explain it because all New York teams right now are just in a drought of their own. So like,
A
I
50-year
think
drought's
a
got to
win.
be like a little bit different than like, hey, I've seen the only team I've not seen win a championship is like the Rangers, or if you want to get into it, like the Islanders and Mets. Like, okay, we don't care about those teams, or the Jets. All right,
Sure,
those
but
teams can go over there. But like for me personally, all right, the good teams, they've all won in the last few times. But I agree. Like, to your point, continue.
yeah, no, it's like no New York team really has won anything major.
The Liberty.
So
Sorry.
Yeah, go Liberty.
Yeah.
we forgot about the Liberty.
Yeah, the NBA with the
So
women in
seeing this, it could put pressure on a team because they're being asked to deliver for this, for the fan base, for the organization. So there's probably a little bit of weight on those shoulders, but nothing too much. I think what they got to deal with is trying to figure out what to do with Wembanyama and Dylan Harper and everyone like that.
Kyle, I couldn't agree more. I did see an interesting stat that I believe OG Anunoby was, I believe, the best out of 100 attempts to stop Wemby. So hopefully, maybe some superstition there. But, like we were talking about, both these teams have gone through incredible paths to get here. And they've also gone through a lot of adversity where, like you mentioned, Spurs have had to go back and battle through a Game 7 against OKC. The Knicks, a lot of people didn't peg them to go here. And obviously, they dropped down 2 games against the Hawks, and everyone was like, oh, this team's terrible. And that's the most adversity it had. But they've gone on a great stretch. Now, they've been arguably, I believe, it's the best 10-game stretch any team has played in NBA history. But Game 1 of the NBA Finals, that's the game that's going to set the tone for how this series goes. Which team do you guys think can battle back from adversity if they lose Game 1 between the Spurs and the Knicks? Kyle, let's start with you.
I feel like it's more the Spurs because every Game 1 so far, I feel like they've lost except I think the Portland series. And I feel like they lose that to feel out their opponents, see what direction and everything. Actually, I don't think they lost Game 1 against OKC, did they? That was the double overtime game. Either way, they were still losing that game if that happened. So it's more about for the Spurs feeling out their opponent this Game 1 because we already know what the Knicks are going to come out with. High-powered offense, threes down the line and everything like that. You got Brunson, and hopefully you get Cat involved in this offensive go-around. So I feel like the Spurs, it's just a feel-out game.
Kyle, I couldn't agree more. You're talking about that adversity, and the Spurs have been able to deal with it. Like you mentioned, they went to double overtime with OKC in Game 1 of that last Western Conference Finals series. They've been, having to come back in other series where they've gone in a lot more where the Knicks have kind of coasted through, and they've had a lot more, easier times where they played only 4 games against 76ers, only 4 games against the Cavs, sweeping both. But, Matt, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier where you mentioned that, hey, with a lot of rest, that could lead to your team getting a little bit rusty. And we saw that in Game 1 against the Cavs for the Knicks, where they were down pretty significantly before a ridiculous run in the fourth quarter kind of sealed the Cavs' fate for the entire series. So, obviously the Spurs, I don't personally believe that's a team you can have that type of rustiness come against and be able to come back against. But I want to know from you, do you think that this is a team that if they were to drop Game 1 after being the last 11 games, no losses, and sweeping the last 2 opponents, do you think the Knicks would be able to battle back from the adversity of taking their first loss in the finals in Game 1?
Well, considering Game 1 is in San Antonio, you kind of expect the struggle from the Knicks, especially, with the rest and everything, and going into an away game. But even if they lose Game 1, they're going directly back home. The New York crowd is going to be insane. I have a feeling that motivation of losing the first game out of 12 is going to be a real push for them to take at least one game, hopefully 2 in a row, hopefully 4 in a row. But if it's a 4-1 series, that'd be great. But realistically, you get to see the Knicks kind of discover what the Spurs are capable of doing. Especially if you are missing Mitch Rob in game one, you get to see his lineups against Cat, against OG. So you get to at least kind of feel out what Wemby is doing against them. So hopefully when you get at least that little bit of help, hopefully Mitch Rob plays game one, you get a little bit better of a feel. Even though it's away, you still get to know how they're going to play. And, the Knicks are going to go back home. They're going to do great. Of course, they've been doing absolutely insane in MSG. But, yeah, I have a feeling that it's only going to affect them maybe for game one, maybe game two. But I have a feeling like they have with these past series, they're just going to be able to come back and – they have a lot of momentum going in, so hopefully we can see that momentum continue to spiral. Even if they lose game one, I have a feeling that they're still going to be able to take it very far.
Well, you said, an away game. I'm sorry, I don't know what that is as a New York Knicks fan. Every city we've gone to, we've taken it over between Cleveland, Atlanta, Philadelphia. All right, that's just New York light everywhere we go. In San Antonio, it's just going to be the same thing that happens for the Knicks, all right? So, as a fan, it's Knicks Nation as everywhere that team's going to go. And we'll see. I do agree with you, though. I think that if this team did take adversity in that game one and they did drop the first game after 10, 11 games, I easily think this is a team that can battle back. But the one thing I'm really curious to know between you guys is this is one philosophy that I haven't heard talked about a lot when I've heard these conversations, which is we've seen a lot of, how great these players are. But one thing that has been brought up is kind of the youth versus a little bit more of the battle-testedness, where, hey, the New York Knicks, this team has been together for a little bit longer. They've had this core guys, but again, now obviously they had Tom Thibodeau at the helm last year, but now they had Mike Brown, and this team was able to go farther by making it through the Eastern Conference Finals, by absolutely destroying the Cleveland Cavaliers, while, hey, the Spurs made it on their first run with Victor Wembanyama, but this team has also still showed an experience at times. I believe against the OKC series, they averaged 16 turnovers a game, which at times. And I believe once De'Aaron Fox came in, that helped, Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper, helped limit their turnovers because he was able to be the primary ball handler again. But I'm curious from your guys' perspective, do you think that the youth of this Spurs team is something that can affect them? Or do you think that the battle hardness of the Knicks, being that this team has been together for a little bit longer, is something that will play into the series at all by any chance? Or do you think it's, doesn't matter, talent's talent, and it doesn't matter what the case is, whoever it is, 7 games, possibly at most, 4 games at the least, that's all that matters? Do you, like I said, do you think that a little bit more of that team chemistry plays into it? Kyle, let's start with you.
For the Knicks, I feel like this is probably one of the better teams that they've versed so far in the playoffs. Well, it's not the better. It is the best team that they're going to be versing in this playoffs compared to what the Eastern Conference holds. And obviously compared to what the Western Conference holds, because you got the Timberwolves, you got the Nuggets, you have the Spurs, you got even when Golden State makes the playoffs, they make everything like a dogfight. So there's so much competition in the West. So for the Knicks, this is probably going to be the hardest competition. This is where their veteranship in the playoffs is going to oppose. So seeing Cat. Hopefully they'll use him more of the 3-point aspect, because Wemby hasn't really guarded someone that like Cat who can hit the 3 ball at a rate that he does. So it's going to be interesting to see him, because we might not see him be that dominant force down in the paint, that blocking monster that we've been seeing this postseason, because he has to worry about Cat at that 3-point, because it's not Chet, it's Cat. He 3-point contest winner. So. And then when it comes to the Spurs, it really does. They lack that playoff experience, as you say. So, hopefully with De'Aaron Fox healthy, they have that veteranship in the playoffs like the Knicks do. So, it limits their turnovers and everything like that. So, I feel like the Spurs are going to have a little bit of a tougher time coming into game 1 and 2, because they don't have that playoff experience that the Knicks do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But you did mention one thing briefly there that you were talking about how this is the best team at the Knicks playoff series, but you didn't think the Cleveland Cavaliers had any level of being on that same level of some of those West teams.
Can I please get into this? Listen, hold on. You bums in the chat wanted to rip me apart. You know what? I know this is going on TikTok, and I am going off on yous. Listen, I was right. I win. You all suck. Whoever wants to keep protecting this bum, please. James Harden, you fraud. You fraud everywhere you go. Oh my God. I'm done with this. I can't even talk about him. It gets my blood going. This dude is a fraud. What did he do? Crap shot. I can't. These people in the chat, because I know this is going on TikTok. Please, I can't wait to read it later. I can't wait.
What, you weren't a fan of 2 of 8, over 6 for 3 in Game 4, or 8 of 15, 1 for 7 from 3? 6 of 15. I just remember someone told me. I was gonna say I remember someone said that hey, James Harden had 2 good games. He's a lock now, and then proceeded to be.
Yeah, to the guy who said James Harden is the playoff riser, delete the app. Don't watch basketball ever again.
Yeah, Kyle. I couldn't agree with you more there. That hey, this Spurs team might be the best the Knicks have played. Tell me how you really feel about the Cavs at least. But Matt, I got to know from you. Do you think this is the best team the Knicks have played so far? And do you think that there's anything that they've at least had to prepare them for this final series?
In preparation, I don't know. You do not have another player like Victor Wembanyama in the East, especially the ones that the Knicks were going against. I mean, you also have a team that is very young and has a lot of depth, as we've seen in the Western Conference Finals. I mean, they've had a lot of guys from the bench come up, put their roles in. We really haven't seen that with, the other teams because, the second round is a sweep. The third round is a sweep. They had a little trouble against the Hawks. They lost 2, but they figured it out. They really did lock in after that. I mean, winning 11 in a row, you can only see that from a historical team, and the Spurs are going to have to deal with that. But thankfully, we have such a good team like the New York Knicks going up against a really good team that thankfully, I mean, they brought Wembanyama, and that completely changed their franchise around.
No, for sure. It's kind of crazy. I saw one thing with the Knicks that this run is something that only teams that have ever really won a championship, I think, outside of one, have ever done. Like, they've done everything that's supposed to check the boxes that a championship team's supposed to do, and it's still not even a possibility that, hey, this team is, like, I think I saw, they had a 35% betting chance that they were going to win the finals. They're not even favored to win, despite having one of the craziest playoff runs so far. And it's crazy to think that out of facing, I don't know what, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, Paul George, James Harden, who else? Evan Mobley, Jared Allen, all these guys so far. Like the guy that's put the most fear in New York fans' heart has been CJ McCollum at 34 years old. Like it's mind-boggling. But I do need to know from you guys if this is to go 7 games. Obviously the Spurs have been a little bit more battle tested in 7-game series so far. This playoffs, obviously having the biggest one with OKC. If this go 7 games, who do you think that favors the most? Matt, let's start with you.
I mean, when you have a Game 7, pressure is going to make diamonds, but also experience is going to be your best teacher. You have experience with the Knicks in, the playoffs, but we haven't seen much. I mean, we haven't seen anything from the top Spurs guys. I mean, a few of them have been in the playoffs, but the main guy, I mean, we're looking at Victor Wembanyama, who, has been to all of the rounds of the playoffs, but has yet to be to a finals. The finals energy is going to be insanely different compared to the Western Conference. You're going up against an opponent that's probably as much of a problem as the Thunder were. I mean, they were able to take that, but you never know. The Knicks have swept 2 teams. They figured them out, so who's to say they can't figure them out as well?
That's a great point there, Matt. Kyle, how about you? If this series is to go 7, who do you think it favors the most between the Knicks and the Spurs?
I think it favors the Spurs because I think they're more all-around built for it when it comes to Wembanyama, who can play defense, and it has that offensive firepower too. You don't know when he's going to pull up from three, as we saw in that overtime win. So you got to pay attention to him. You got the guards who do amazing on defense for themselves also, and they have that offensive firepower. So with the Knicks, you got two players. Cat has upticked in the defensive department this year. We definitely see that. I'm not gonna hold that. So, but again, it's not the best defense, and when coming from the Timberwolves, who, when you're not known for defense, it's going to be a hard task going up against the alien Wembanyama. So, and then you got Brunson when he also isn't the greatest on defense going up against those guards. So it's going to be interesting. You got Mikal, OG, who are fantastic on the defensive side. Hopefully OG can get a couple 30-point games, and that will help this New York Knicks definitely overcome the Spurs.
It's great points, but you brought up something there that I'm a little bit curious about. So we've talked about how, hey, Brunson's going to have some hard time with some guard matchups. Cat, despite the fact that he's averaging, I believe it's 10.6 rebounds and 1.4 blocks this entire playoff run, and having some of his best defense, he's going to have to play against a guy who's just genuinely unstoppable. Like, Chet was looking great before he went against Wemby, and Wemby literally took this guy's soul and literally dunked the ball on him so hard he didn't want to ever shoot the ball again for the rest of the game in the Western Conference Finals. But I was going to say, they don't call Jalen Brunson Captain Clutch for nothing, all right? Everyone, counts the Knicks out until the Knicks show up, all right? Everyone's better than the Knicks until it's time to be better than the Knicks. So, time to put up or shut up, I think it's for the Spurs, Obviously, Knicks have a little bit more to prove. They haven't been there in 50 years, and they're going against one of the most storied or not 50 years, but they haven't won in 50 years. They haven't been there since in 25, and they're facing one of the most storied championship franchises in all of NBA history with the San Antonio Spurs. It's a tall mountain for both teams to have to climb. But obviously, we're talking about Game 7s, but the real meat and potatoes here. We've had a finals predictions a couple times. I gotta know. Who's taking the finals? We finally have it set between Spurs and Knicks. Who's taking it? Who's being the playoff riser here? But how many games? Give me all the works here. Kyle, give me the start here. Who do you think's winning it, and how many games is it gonna go?
I believe the Spurs are going to win it because we just saw them, bottle up Shea. He wasn't that, that person that we're so used to seeing against the Spurs this series. So, I mean, they figured out how to stop him. He wasn't putting up godly, amounts of points. He still did what he can, but again, they bottled him up in very little ways that they could. So to see what they're going to do up against Brunson and them is going to be an interesting thing. I think the Spurs are going to win this.
I think that's a great point. The only thing I'm just the most curious about is I wonder who they're going to have to stop for the good old Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby combo, because that's the one thing I'm the most curious. You're going to tell me Harrison Barnes and was it Carter Bryant are going to be the stoppers there? I'm just, Mikal Bridges has been doing pretty good there, but I do think you're right that, hey, this team did just make the MVP look like he didn't know how to play basketball. Like obviously there's times where they may have been trying to get their foul baits or whatever the case is, however you want to look at OKC, but they genuinely made Shea not like as effective. And I feel like their true X factor of that series could have been Jalen Williams, who's been mostly injured. Everything kind of stacked up perfectly for the Spurs in that, and I feel like it kind of helps that with the Knicks in this case for the Spurs because they have a lot of the similarities of the OKC team, but outside of, I think, of those wings. But Matt, what do you think? Who do you think's taking this series? How many games? And what's going to be the real standout moments, I guess, do you think?
So I'm thinking Knicks in 6. We've seen so much domination. I mean, it's a historical run. I mean, I really haven't seen many teams that have lost the finals, of course, with this point differential. But also, Game 7 Shea was the only reason that the OKC Thunder were honestly doing anything.
That's fair.
Everybody else was falling apart. He dropped, 38 points, I believe? He was the only reason that they actually brought it to the end of the fourth quarter.
Other than that, what did he really do?
I mean, well, we also saw great officiating in Game 6 and 7. They were not getting any foul bait calls. It was awesome to see actual basketball being played. And honestly, I think that's the reason that they actually took it to Game 7 and took it all, because they were just not getting the calls that they expect. You know, these teams are, unfortunately, they're learning how to flop. It's an unfortunate part of the game. They should be getting technicals and fines for it. But no, they're getting, to the Western Conference Finals. Thankfully losing, but still, that's only because they finally were not getting away with it. And every other series, they were getting away with it. And it's just good to actually see that the refs were calling it correctly. So hopefully we can continue to see that in the finals here. And go Knicks.
I will say, as much as I do like to give crap to OKC, I will say if you watch that full series, I feel like the officiating on both ends was just awful in both. Like, Spurs started getting their own calls after OKC was starting to get some of that crap early on, but like, genuinely, I was watching. I believe it was who I mentioned earlier, Carter Bryant. I watched this man run from the 3-point line. Basically just directly in the shot. I'm like, there was just nothing here. Everyone was trying to just murder each other, which fun, but when you have guys who are made of glass on your team in the Trump, I pray to God that Wemby at least has respect for our team, and that the Knicks can not deal with some pain like that, and we have some good officiating in the finals here with the it's a more respectable matchup here, in my opinion. Like you said, we don't need that foul bait in OKC, but
exactly.
I will say, I swear to God, imagine just at final Game 7 blocked by Cornette one more time. I'm like that's this type of thing. I'm just that's the worries as a Knicks fan. But like you said, Matt, I feel like I couldn't agree with you more. Knicks in 6. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen in the Garden. It has to be. It just has to be. Everything on paper that the Knicks have done this playoff run is just stuff that championship teams have done. They've only lost 2 games, and they've all been by a combined score of 2 points. It is literally one bucket that has put them down on those 2 games. Other than that, you would be looking at a perfect run right now. And mind you, one of those was on a freaking C.J. McCollum game winner, right? Like, not exactly in the thing, but he hit that shit with like 10 seconds left. All right, so I'm just saying, Knicks in 6. It's gonna happen. If not, I don't want to hate Wemby, but this will make me hate this man. So that will unfortunately do it for us here.
I feel
going up I feel that, Kyle. You see,
heartbreak.
Hey, that's hard, but you see, I get it, but I can't say anything because your team also hasn't really had a championship. So, I mean, it's fair, but 50 years, man.
Hold on, wait.
50
never
years.
Really had. We've never had. Let's get this straight.
Okay, I never had one in my lifetime. Tomato. How he,
At
she.
least have one. We don't have anything.
Yeah, we had one when half the teams didn't play. What do you do? Hell. Anyways, unfortunately, that will do it for us here on a podcast. Once again, I was joined by Kyle Finnegan and Matthew Bagel Boy Biegel. It is always a pleasure to be joined by these two. Anyways, thank you guys all for watching this episode of a podcast. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure to follow us on all our socials, except for James Harden guy on TikTok. You don't know ball. Anyways, you have a great rest.
Hold on, wait. Before you finish this, uninstall the app. You don't know ball. You called him a playoff riser. They probably would have had a better chance if they thrown you on the court, low key.
Anyways, that'll do it. Have a great rest of your day, evening, or whatever time it is for you, and we will see you here from a podcast.